A man wanted me in the theater for everything. The weekend after my 24th birthday in February this year, I went on a blind date that ended atrociously, as the person I met smelled like a skunk and was a liar. That's not the scary part, though. I bought a ticket for my date and myself, but the movie didn't start for another 45 minutes, so I just waited in the theater lobby until she would show up. I was on the far left corner of a bench when a large burly man walked up to the bench and sat directly next to me. "Hi," he said. As a slightly awkward guy, I sheepishly said, "Hi." The man smiled, opened up his coat, reached in, and pulled out a package of salami. "This is the best motherfucking salami. You want to buy some?" he said. "No thanks, I'm full," I said. He raised his eyebrows and put the salami back in his coat. In the same movement, however, he pulled out a package of cheese. "And this cheese? You want to buy some goddamn good pepper jack?" He leaned towards me with his question. "No, I'm afraid not." He sighed, put the cheese back in his coat, and zipped it up. The man was silent for the next 5 minutes, but my heart was pounding from being uncomfortable. The man finally relented and nudged me. He pointed at the poster for Mockingjay. "That's a fine-ass logo," he smirked. I looked at the poster. "It is pretty cool, isn't it?" I forced myself to say. "I'm a tattoo artist. I gotta put it on someone, maybe you, yeah. I would love to ink your canvas. I mean, you're well built. One could do wonders with your skin." I went wide-eyed in dismay at how creepy this guy was. I couldn't even respond at this point. "I'm also a musician. I bet you have great vocal cords. I love to audition you." He smiled at me. "Maybe another time, man. I'm meeting my date any second now," I said. "Is she hot?" he said, with his tone deeper and more serious. "I don't know, we'll see." "Well, lucky her," he said. He reached out and stroked my hairline and ran his fingers through my admittedly long hair. Lucky her. I sprang up on my feet and stomped out of the theater. "Ah, come on, man, you can't just leave me like," he shouted after me when a theater usher stomped up to him and yelled at him to leave. After 3 minutes, I re-entered the theater, and the creep was nowhere to be seen. I can handle myself, but I felt violated by the whole incident. Let's not meet. Don't ever get in the car with a stranger. Basic life rule. At the time this incident took place, I was 19 years old. Very petite and overly trusting, I can tell you. Being a 30-year-old mother of 2 now, I am haunted by the memory of that night. It all started on an extremely cold night in February, in one of the coldest cities in Canada. My boyfriend at the time, Cameron, drove myself and a few friends to a bar in the downtown part of the city. Our relationship was always very dramatic, and alcohol tended to heighten the drama. As the evening got late, Cameron took more interest in another girl at the bar, and naturally, I was angry. The gang decided to head on to an after party since it was last call at the bar, around 1:45 a.m. I was beyond my limit of vodka sodas, and had no interest of going to another party with Cameron and the girl that he was clearly into. We all got into the car and tensions rose. As I demanded to be driven home, Cameron refused. He insisted on going to the party. The argument continued until I finally yelled at him to pull the car over and let me out. I was shocked when he did just that, and then proceeded to drive off and leave me downtown at 2 a.m. in the dead of winter, in nothing but a dress, nylon socks, high heels, and a light winter dress coat. As I watched the car drive away, it occurred to me he wasn't coming back. I began to text girlfriends looking for help to get home. No one answered. I had no money left in my purse for a taxi. Terrified to call my parents and tell them the whole story, they already disliked Cameron. I decided to start walking. The conditions were extreme for my wardrobe. My hands, legs, and feet ached from the cold. I sobbed as I walked down the empty streets. I was approximately 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles, from my parents' residence. The temperature that night would have been in the range of -20 Celsius or -4 Fahrenheit. I began to panic. I cried harder, and the tears froze to my cheeks. Although the streets were quiet, I heard the sound of a vehicle approaching behind me. I turned to see a middle-aged white man in an older model sedan pull over to the curb. The window rolled down, and he asked if I was alright. "Fine, thanks," I replied and kept walking. He proceeded to slowly follow and said, "Can I give you a ride? It's freezing out here and very dangerous for a young woman to be walking alone at this hour." I declined his help and continued walking. The man, who identified himself as Bill, continued to follow me and explained he had a daughter my age and would be terrified to know she was out here like this. Eventually, I did the unthinkable. I agreed to get inside the car. Bill was a clean-cut man who looked to be late 40s. His vehicle was tidy, and at first glance he seemed very average. He began by asking where he could drive me to, and I directed him to my parents' affluent neighborhood, which was about a 10-minute drive. He began to tell me about his children, one boy and one girl, both teenaged. He explained he had recently split up with his wife. "Do you want to know why we split up?" he asked me. I politely replied, "Sure, if you want to talk about it." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Bill shifting. He had what appeared to be a winter coat over his lap. My stomach tightened, and a wave of dread washed over me. He moved the coat to reveal the bottom down, in which she was dressed in woman's underwear, garters, thigh-high stockings, and high-heeled shoes. "I'm going to die tonight." Those words echoed in my mind. I realized Bill had been out looking for someone just like me, and I feared the worst. No one would ever know what happened to me. Why hadn't I just called my parents? Like parents, they told me from day one, never get into a stranger's car. When I got older, they always urged me to call them if I was out somewhere and needed help. Why had I put myself in this situation? Bill continued to speak to me, snapping me out of my thoughts. My wife wasn't into this sort of thing. She told me it was weird and sick. I tried to calm down. "Well, I think you should find someone who can be yourself with, Bill," I told him. I tried to keep the conversation supportive. For the next few minutes, I was paralyzed with fear. He continued to tell me about his sexual fantasies as we drove. Finally, after what seemed like the longest drive of my life, he turned into my block. I told him to park a ways up so he didn't see which house was mine. He put the car in park and turned to me. "Now, I have something to ask you. Would you please give me one of your shoes? I like to smell it while I masturbate." I almost choked. "No, Bill, that would make me feel very uncomfortable," I told him. He sighed. "Well, I want something in return for helping you." He sounded irritated with me. "How about this? Go into your house and get me a pair of old shoes. I will take them as payment for the ride." Of course, I agreed. I practically burst out the car, walked as fast as I could to the gate of the backyard. I scrambled to unlock the back door and locked it shut behind me. I hurried to the front windows and watched for him to follow me. He didn't. Eventually, he must have given up, and I saw the vehicle pull away. I had never been so relieved. I can't explain the desperation I must have been feeling that night. I had never done anything that crazy before. Here is where things get worse. The next morning, my friend Lily called me back. Worried about all the missed calls on her phone, I told her the whole story. She was silent for a moment. "Maggie, you won't believe this, but I've heard that exact same story before. A girl from work told us that a few months ago, but she's not very credible, so none of us believed her. So apparently this was Bill's thing. My question is, did things escalate as time went on? My skin crawls when I remember that night. Bill, let's not meet again." You want my shoes? Why? Creepy just seems to follow me. I had to run to a local corner store for milk and gas. It was in February, and in Minnesota, that's cold. I was wearing a heavy jacket, hat, and mittens, but in my rush, I just threw on my favorite slip-on, Minnetonka moccasins. Leaving the store, a man approached me. This was a smaller-sized town, so at first, I wasn't afraid at all. Just thought he needed directions or something like that. I should have known immediately something was up because his first sentence was, "This is gonna sound odd, but..." He proceeded to tell me he was trying to play a prank on a friend and wondered if I might sell my shoes. I think I blinked twice as the reality of the situation sank in. "You want my shoes?" "I'm sorry, but no," I said as he stepped closer. He was between me and my car, so I attempted to step around him when he stepped in front of my car and put his hands on the car handle and said, "Look, I just really need your shoes. I locked eyes with him and told him the first thing I was gonna do was stab him in the eyes with my keys, and that I would scream as loud as I could if he didn't back away from my car. I took one step towards him, probably not smart. He called me a selfish bitch and walked off. I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked how much he was willing to pay for my shoes, and before anyone here asks, I didn't let it get that far and it would not have mattered. There was not a time when I went back to the store that I didn't look around and worry that he would be there. I used to live by myself and was told to post here from Reddit No Sleep. I've never even met him. I didn't know his name or face. I was blissfully unaware of his very existence. I'll never know why or when it started. I'm glad for that, I guess. I moved into my very small apartment in February of last year. My landlord, Olivia, was a sweet older woman who would cook to much and bring me much appreciated leftovers. She was great to me, even after telling her my problem. I am antisocial, but she didn't mind renting to a reclusive young girl who reminded her of her daughter. Every few weeks, she would knock on my door then leave, letting me know she was leaving something for me. I love that. Not even my family would cook so well. The next morning, I wash and leave her empty containers outside my door, and by an hour or so, she would take them back again. My other neighbors seemed fine, but I never talked or visited with them. I work from home, so anytime I ever was forced to go out, I rushed out and into my apartment, avoiding any uncomfortable situations. I love living alone. It was everything I hoped for. I could just breathe. By April, though, I started noticing things were not right. They were moving or plain disappearing. I was convinced it was just my anxiety because of my new medication and the move. Another side effect was it would make me so drowsy since I hated seeing the doctor I just dealt. I took naps during the day now, and eventually stopped caring until one incident doubled my paranoia. Olivia bought me some sort of a Greek toast salad and dressing for lunch one day, and I enjoyed it with my friend Netflix. I fell asleep in the middle of Portlandia, and woke up that evening at 5 p.m. per usual. What was not usual for my bedding on the opposite side of me was disturbed. I only sleep on the right side, always. Even more, it felt warm. My first thought was I must have rolled around a lot in my sleep, but I knew it was too odd to dismiss. I got up and searched my apartment, gripping my phone, with 911 typed in. Nothing else was disturbed. Everything was exactly like it should be. I let it go, and for the next few weeks, everything was normal. Pardon the occasional misplaced shoe or drawn back shower curtain. I thought about telling someone my parents may be Olivia, but if it's not life or death, I am not reaching out to anyone. I wasn't scared, I was nervous, maybe a little stubborn, but I stayed. I'm not letting some stupid anxiety ruin my lovely, lonely world. May came and it was getting worse. My panties, toothbrush, hell, even my food was being misplaced. Every time I woke up, there was a strange odor in the air. I finally realized that this won't go away by ignoring it. I called my mom and begged to come stay a few days. When I got home, I told them everything. Saying it out loud solidified my creepy suspicions. That weekend, my dad went to my apartment, and what was found was true horror. Written all over that walls. Come back. Baby, please. He ran out and called the police. There was no one living in my apartment, but someone definitely had access besides me. The investigation revealed a man, Henry, the son of my landlord, Olivia, was in a projected relationship with me. They showed me his confession on tape. He admitted coming into my apartment every night and every day with his mom's extra key. He claims we were in love and he had my permission. He drugged his mother's food, in which she left for me, causing me my drowsiness and falling asleep, so he could come in and watch me sleep, touch my hair, kiss my shoulders. The leftovers I had in the fridge were tested and confirmed. I was absolutely horrified and disgusted. A man I never even knew existed collected my drain hair, clothes, and trash, and practically lived in my apartment for 4 months. Get in the truck right now. This happened in 1991. I just moved back to Houston, Texas, and was living in an apartment not far from the Katy Freeway. My cat had slipped out, and I had gone to look for him. This was on a Friday evening in February, about 5 p.m., still daylight. There was a car dealership in front of the road to my apartment complex, with a vacant lot, about 2 acres or so, in front of the dealership. The freeway feeder road was separated from that vacant lot by a large drainage ditch. Fearing that my beloved cat had strayed all the way out to the ditch, I was walking along the opposite side of the ditch from the feeder road. A guy in a pickup pulled over to the feeder road, rolled down the passenger window, and screamed, "Get in the truck right now! Get in the truck right now!" He looked angry and insane. Terrified, I tore across the vacant lot to the car dealership, screaming for help all the way. I was afraid to look behind me. I didn't stop until I was inside the dealership, breathless and panting and frightened. I think they let me use the phone to call the police. He wouldn't do anything, as I had no identifying information. I was terrified that he had driven over the dealership and would be waiting for me when I finally left, outside. I waited for about 15 minutes, then sprinted for my apartment, making sure to carefully look around before leaving the safety of the dealership. When I got to apartment, I found that my husband, at that time a platonic friend, had dropped by and was waiting at my door. I flung myself at him. I had never been so glad to see someone. Over the years, I have sometimes wondered what the deal with this guy in the truck was. Was he a serial rapist killer? If so, would I have been his first victim? Or another in a long string of victims? What if that big drainage ditch hadn't been between us? Would I be alive to write about this experience? By the way, I never did find my cat. Southeast Asia. I was in Laos in February 2015, and I was with a group of friends I had met traveling, and me and the Swiss girl were sharing a bungalow, and the people who were leaving the bungalow said a guy had come into their room somehow, and she woke up to him holding her hand laying on the ground. She screamed, and the guy scampered off. That night, me and her were at the bonfire on the beach, and we went to walk home. We noticed a guy following us. Every turn we made, he made, so eventually we told him to fuck off as he followed us into the yard of the hostel. He ran off, and we didn't think anything of it. That night, we both woke up to the door rattling, and then what sounded like someone under the bungalow. I jumped out of bed and chased the guy out and off the property. I asked the guy who was running the place about it, and he said that it was a crazy guy who does this to backpackers. I ended up meeting this guy the next day, and he was extremely mentally handicapped, and what seemed like really just wanted to be held by somebody. Turned out, he was completely harmless, and this was a completely harmless situation after all, but for sure gave us quite a scare at the time. Sniffed my hair, then followed me home. This is my first ever post on Reddit, so I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes. This might be slightly long, so I apologize again. A little bit of background information on myself first. I am a 5'3" blonde 20-year-old female, who actually looks more around 16 years old, and possibly even younger without my hair or makeup done properly. Unfortunate, I know. Anyways, I attend a night class at my local college, which runs from 6 p.m. until 8:45 p.m. However, we usually get out early around 8:10. This one night, I chose to have a slow walk down to the bus station, which is usually around a 5-minute walk, so of course, I got there with plenty of time remaining before my 8:30 bus home. So I get to the bus station, walk over to my stand, and sit down, minding my own business, listening to my music. I look up to see if I know anybody in different stands when I catch the eye of a tall, oddly pale guy dressed in matching combat clothing, standing in a couple stands down, which I found rather odd, since we were in a town center, but whatever. People can wear what they like, right? After this, every time I happened to look up from my phone, I found this guy staring straight at me, which I found rather weird, and I was thankful my bus was soon, and I could get away from this creep. Wrong. My bus pulled in early for the first time, like every on a Tuesday afternoon. But I was thankful because I thought I was getting away from this guy giving me the creepy eye contact. So I mute my music but keep my earphones in and get up and head to the line of people waiting to get on, and so does he. I do the polite thing and allow this guy to get on the bus first so I could sit away from him, but instead he just reaches his hand out gesturing me to go first. Of course, not knowing what to do, I walk onto the bus and sit downstairs, where I knew would get potentially busy. Unluckily for me, this creep sits straight behind me at the back of the bus, not realizing until the bus actually sets off that he was leaning incredibly far over the seats, so his head was practically touching mine. This is when I click on and see his reflection and realize that what he's doing is sniffing my hair, which at the time was up in a messy bun. Completely freaked out for a second, I jolt myself forward, so I'm leaning straight forwards. Thankfully, my bus ride is only around 20 minutes long, so I contact my mom, explaining what was happening and how this creep is being super weird to me, telling her that if I ring her, then to pick up immediately, because he followed me from the bus. At last, my stop comes around. I waited till the very last second to press the bell, and get up just to see if he would follow me. I jump up from my seat. Unfortunately, so does he. Completely freaked out, I scramble for my phone, almost in tears by this point. I ring her and simply say, "It happened." Speed off the bus, followed by super creep. I practically spring to the back of the bus and just walk straight out into oncoming traffic. Walking as fast as I can without making it obvious or actually running, I walk as fast as my little legs would allow me, thinking how thankful I was for living a mere 5 minutes away from the stop, even though at this particular moment, it felt forever, and I just wanted to get home and away from this guy. He caught up pretty fast for the speed I was walking, kicking items such as bottles to let me know he was still behind me. I think I actually shit myself a little from fear, and I just kept walking as I was at the bend near the start of my street, when I ran across the road to see my mom waiting at the end of my street. This guy now walking parallel to me on the other side of the road, just walking along staring at me while keeping dead in line of me. I caught up to my mom and stopped, explained as quiet as possible that the guy was the guy who followed me. However, as I stopped, so did he, and just stood there watching me with my mom. Of course, my mom, being my mom, did the exact same thing back. Eventually, he carried on walking, and the second we were out of his sight, we ran as fast as we could around our street, into our house, locked the windows and doors behind us. I didn't report it until a couple of days later, when I found out a young lass had been followed also earlier that night. Can we bear in mind that this was back in February, and it's now June, and a couple weeks ago I saw something on local news about a guy dressed in matching combats sexually assaulting young girls. I'm glad I was this lucky. Let's not meet Mr. Creepy Combat Man. Terror all around my house. I'm a 26-year-old female. I live in a small, quiet town in southern Connecticut. I live in the type of town where nothing ever happens. Some of the biggest, craziest news comes directly from our town. Was a few years back. We had a hurricane and a couple guys from my condo that went to the beachfront homes a couple towns over and stripped all the copper they could find. Woohoo. Anyways, this story took place about 2 years ago, 2013, in February. I was home alone. My parents, who have more of a social life than I do, were at their friend's house for dinner and game night. I'm not sure where my now wife was, probably out with her sister. My condo is technically 3 floors. The first floor is my garage, a man cave, 2 closets, and a laundry. The second floor is my kitchen, a half bathroom, and living room. In the living room across from the stairs that led to the 3rd floor are 4 stairs leading down to my front door. The third floor is my bedroom, my parents' room, a hall closet, and bathroom. So, I am upstairs this night, in my bedroom per usual, when my two dogs start going nuts. It's totally normal for them to get a bit crazy when they hear or see someone or something outside, so I almost think nothing of it. Except they didn't stop. I muted my TV and figured out why. There was someone trying to open my front door, except they weren't turning the doorknob. It was like they were holding on to the knob, but pushing the door in and out very quickly and almost violently. I was scared. I knew my wife wasn't home, and if she had been and didn't have her key, she would have texted me. I wanted to go downstairs, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to let whoever this was know I was home or not, and my stairs are pretty goddamn noisy. I stand at the top of my stairs, not sure what to do. I thought about yelling out of my bedroom window as it faced my driveway and the direction of the front door. But if I yelled down to them, I was terrified who or what I would see if they peeked up at me from the corner of my front porch. I stayed put. Dog still freaking out, of course. A few minutes go by, and the push-pull of my door stops. I hear them go down the wooden stairs praying they would leave. Nope. They start banging on my garage with both hands. Who the hell is this? I can tell it's only one person, but this one person was terrifying. Bang, 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 bang. Should I call the cops? Probably. I'd never really been so scared that I couldn't move. I'd only slowly walked from the top of my stairs into my bedroom. But as soon as I heard the banging on the garage, I was frozen again, standing in my bedroom. Again, the banging stopped, and it stopped for a minute or so. I stood at the edge of my bed. My legs were shaking. I was ready to call my wife when I hear this person banging again, with both hands on my sliding glass door in the back of my house. I couldn't believe this was happening to me in my town. I kept thinking, if they break that glass and make it inside, I had no weapons, and my poor babies were downstairs. Bang, 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 bang! On and on. I started to cry. I couldn't move again, sitting at the end of my bed, shaking like a leaf, crying, unable to think clearly. It finally stopped. Did someone call the cops? Is there a cop out taking this freak into custody? No! A minute later, I hear 4 more loud bangs on my garage doors. It stops again. It never starts back up. I stand up, wondering if this really happened. Why didn't my neighbors call the cops? Who was that and what did they want? Was this a prank? I'll never know. When I pulled myself together, I called my parents and my wife. My parents came home ASAP. We went over to my immediate neighbor Dan's house. He wasn't home. There was no damage to anything, except maybe me. I refused to stay home alone at night for months after that. It never happened again, knock on wood. This might not sound too scary to some people, but the unknown is sometimes a lot more scary than what you do know. Was it my imagination or did I really see it? Quick verification, I'm a female, 15 years old. So first time posting, though I've read quite a few stories on here. This took place in about February. It was about 11 at night, and I was browsing on eBay looking at hoodies and whatnot, when I heard 3 quick taps on the window. Now, the computer is in the living room, which has 3 windows. One behind the recliner I was in, another on the same wall just about 6 feet down, and the last across from the chair. The window this happened in is right next to our porch. Anyways, I look out the window and saw what I thought to be the trash can, until a car drove by and I saw the figure of a man. Me being the paranoid teen, froze, watching, and slowly got up, and once out of view of the window, booked it to my parents' room. I woke my dad up and he told me that I was seeing things and to go to bed. I walked back and grabbed a knife and looked, seeing nothing. So if someone was out there, they left. Also note, we've had someone steal my parents' cigarettes off our sun porch, steal gas, and I've had a few creepers in my life. One who I last heard lived just a few miles away. So did I just see something or was someone watching me? Any advice is welcome. Man in the tree. Hello. This is my first real post on Reddit. I work for a security company in Ireland, which mainly deals with alarm calls. Like a building's alarms go off, we go in and find what sets it off and resets the alarm, all that stuff. At around 2:30 a.m., I received an activation at a golf club. I arrived a short time later. Now, upon entering the golf club and checked the alarm panel, it was telling me the alarm was activated at the caretaker shed. Now, this shed is located at the back of the golf club, around 3/4 of a mile up a dirt road through a mini forest with no lighting whatsoever. I set off in the security vehicle up the dirt road and arrived at the gates to the shed. I got out and followed the headlights of the car to the gate and proceeded to open it when I heard something dropping off to the left of the gate. It kind of made me jump, as it was pitch black outside and I was alone. I shined my torch flashlight around on the ground but couldn't see a thing. Then I heard faint breathing. It was a calm night, so it wasn't the wind. I used my torch and had a nosy around the trees. I wasn't thinking of looking up at the time, as there was no need, I thought. As I was scanning around the trees, I saw something like a small rock fall from one of them, so I shined the torch up into one tree and saw a shadowy figure in amongst the leaves. I could see his eyes and a bit of his forehead and nose, and all else was hidden behind the leaves of the tree. He wasn't moving or making any noises, but I was really shaking, as I wasn't expecting to see anyone in such a remote place. I started cursing and blinding at him and asking what he was playing at, but got no response from him. I didn't know what to do, so after about a minute of trying to get a response from him, I walked slowly backwards to the gate, which was about 25 yards from this guy in the tree. I turned around to push the gate open, and I heard an almighty thud, as if he just leapt from the tree. I went around with my torch and couldn't see a damn thing. I looked back up in the tree and couldn't see him. This is where I froze, because I didn't know what the hell was happening, or if I turned around, he was going to be standing there. I started to hear these short bursts of screams coming from somewhere in the forest. That's when I kind of said screw it and hopped back into the security vehicle and head on back down the dirt road. A couple seconds into driving, I'd open my window a crack and shine my torch into the trees to see this guy all in black, wearing some messed up mask, running through the trees at full speed, alongside vehicle about 10 yards out. I put my boot on the floor and got out of there. I've never been so scared before in my life. I told my boss at the end of my shift what happened. He said that it happened to another driver a few years ago, but he actually called the police, and the police said there are a few junkies who squat in that area, and that it could have been a junkie thinking of robbing him. I don't know who or what it was, but it freaked me the hell out, and I am not one to scare easily. But it is safe to say I ain't going back there. Someone else can deal with that call. We don't have a home phone. I told this story to a few friends of mine a few days ago, and they said I should put it here. Sorry in advance that this is so long. The events took place between 1997 and 2009. I am 23 years old now. In the fall of 97, my mother took me, my sister, and my sister's boyfriend out to the movies in a neighboring town. My sister got to pick the movie, and the only showing we could catch was a late one, so we didn't manage to start our way home until at around 11 p.m. at night. We were close to home, driving down a back road. I was asleep in the front seat, and my sister and her boyfriend were in the back. A cop car comes up behind us and drove behind us for a while. Then after about 5 minutes of following us, turns his lights on. My mother says she hadn't been speeding and was aware they had been following us, but she pulled over. My mom and sister say a man came to the window and didn't ask for ID or registration and started asking Mom where she lived, saying there had been a robbery nearby and her vehicle matched a description of the getaway car. He asked her to get out and she said no. It was at this time that my sister's boyfriend leaned his head into the front seat to see what was going on. He was the local sheriff's son, and the man must have recognized him because he immediately got nervous and told Mom to go on home and walk back to his car. My sister's boyfriend said he didn't recognize the cop at all, and Mom drove around for 20 more minutes in circles to make sure he didn't follow us home. Mom would later tell me that there had been reports a few months later of a man pretending to be a cop, stopping and raping women in the area. For the next 11 years, nothing else happened and everyone pretty much forgot, or at least I did. Mom always remembered. But then, weird stuff started happening at home. My mom and dad had gotten a divorce in 2002, and my sister went off to college that same year. In 2003, we had moved to a house pretty much in the middle of nowhere with only a couple neighbors. The lock on our door was loose and I, being a forgetful high schooler, would often lose my key and have to card my way inside after I got off the bus. One afternoon, February 2008, I noticed a car come to a stop in front of my driveway. As I got up to the front door, I didn't think anything of it, but the car stayed there as I carded the door. If it stayed after, I didn't notice. But after that day is when somebody started breaking in. Now, I don't think whoever watched me go inside could have seen me card the door, but they must have figured it out, because Mom and I would often come home to find things not the way we left them. Nothing was ever taken that we could tell. One day, a painting above the couch in the living room ended up propped up against the opposite wall. Another day, all the medicine and first aid supplies were moved from above our washing machine to the kitchen table in neat rows. My mom began to suspect it was a woman named Susan, who was in love with my mom's boyfriend, trying to scare her into leaving him. There had been many arguments, and the woman had said something about watching her before, so it was natural for us to assume that. We ended up changing the locks about 4 months into 2008, after finding our house broken into about 5 times that we knew of. As it was, 5 times we found things rearranged. They seemed to do the trick. However, whoever was harassing us found a new way to do so, and began calling my mother and me on our cell phones. It was always from a blocked number, and they never said anything. They would hang up the second we said hello. They were calling all hours of the day at least 10 times. They would call me while I was at school, while Mom was at work. We eventually stopped answering any number we didn't recognize, and after 2 months, the calls stopped. My mom was still convinced it was Susan. I asked her why she would be calling me and how she would have even gotten my number, and my mom didn't know. In late 2008, the Susan moved several towns away to be with her daughter, who had gotten pregnant. We were sure that it meant the end to all the nonsense and we could forget about her. In early 2009, my boyfriend proposed to me while he was overseas in Iraq, and I started planning on moving away with him when he came back in May. One evening in March, I went wedding dress shopping with a friend of mine, who was also getting married around the same time as me. My mother was out of town, taking my grandmother to a specialist 9 hours away for an appointment, so I was home alone for the weekend. When I came home that night, I noticed immediately that something was wrong as I drove up the street. Every light in my house was on, even my mother's bedroom and bathroom lights, rooms that had not been in at all since before she left. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw that the front door was wide open. I started to panic and called my friend's fiance, who lived 5 minutes away, and told him I was too afraid to go inside. He showed up right away and went into my home, checking the rooms for me. After 10 minutes, he came back outside. He told me he checked every room and closet and there was nobody there, but that I need to see my room. I followed him back in and went to my room. It had been ransacked. My drawers had been emptied out onto the floor. My closet had all the coats and shoes removed. My vanity was covered in spilled makeup. On the bed was my underwear. I checked my mother's room and it was the same. My friend's fiance hid in his car in our pasture and stayed awake in the living room all night, hoping whoever it was would come back. They never did. I cleaned up the rooms and acted as if it hadn't happened, but I didn't leave the house anymore. When I told my mom, she blamed it on Susan again. She told me she had found a pair of women's underwear at her boyfriend's house, and that he had confessed that they were Susan's. She had confronted Susan, threatening to expose her to the church Susan was a pastor at, and she assumed that this was the woman's counter. While my mother just seemed to get angrier, I became intensely paranoid on any given night. A noise outside or a glimpse of headlights would give me panic attacks. I was sure someone was after us, and Mom didn't believe me. It all came to a head one night in May at 3 a.m. I was awake, waiting for a call from my fiance. My mother had long gone to bed. I noticed a flash of light through my curtains and quickly began to become anxious. I told myself it was probably just a car or somebody's porch lights coming on, but I saw it again and again, roving the yard. It was a flashlight. I climbed out of bed and crept into the hallway connected to the living room. There was a window right next to where the hall led into the living space, and I didn't dare move any further, as the shades were up. I could see the flashlight moving around the back of the house. I waited for several minutes and eventually could see it in the front yard. Again. My mother must have seen it too, because suddenly she was in the kitchen next to the front windows, whispering to me across the room. She asked if I had seen it, and I nodded. She said somebody had tapped on her window, and she had seen the flashlight. She moved the front window curtains and pulled them back a bit, and said that there was a car in our driveway with its lights off. She said she couldn't see the flashlight anymore. They must have seen her because there was suddenly a loud knock on the front screen door, and we could hear it moving as somebody tried to open it. We didn't move for about 30 seconds, and again there was a loud knock. We heard a man's voice yell, "Hello! Is everybody alright? It's the police!" Mom crept over to the door and opened it partway, but left the screen door closed. From my vantage point, I could just see it was just one man. I told him, "Yeah, we know. Yeah, we're fine. Sorry we didn't answer. We were scared. We saw a flashlight in the yard and didn't know it was a cop." The man replied, "Yeah, I was looking around to make sure everything was alright, just in case." That didn't make any sense. My mom got confused and said, "Yeah, everything's fine. What's going on?" The cop seemed to get annoyed with my mom and for some reason told her, "We got a 911 call from here and there was nobody on the line, just a lot of heavy breathing. And we thought you had a break-in." My mom clearly wasn't buying this. She quickly asked him, "You only sent one guy for a break-in and walk around the yard for 10 minutes. And who called? I was asleep in bed." The cop sighed and said, "I was just being careful. Somebody called 911 from this residence on your landline, and we came to investigate." Both of us knew immediately that it was a lie. My mom told him, "We don't have a landline. We haven't had a home phone in 6 years." The man threw himself against the screen door and shouted at my mother, "Let me in, Teresa!" He yelled at her, using her first name. My mom yelled and shut the door in his face. He banged on the door several times and my mom called her boyfriend. She yelled at the man that she had called the police and that he better get out of here and leave her alone. It seemed to do the trick because the banging stopped and in a few seconds, we heard this engine start and he drove away while we waited for my mom's boyfriend to show up. Mom asked me if I remembered how she had been stopped by a man pretending to be a cop when I was a little kid. She wouldn't say anything else. But I've come to suspect that the man who came to her door was the same person who stopped her that night. We relayed the whole thing to her boyfriend, and he advised we actually call the police and tell them everything that has been happening to us. We heeded him and found out there actually had been a call to her house from her own home phone number with nothing but heavy breathing. We never found out how that would have happened. We haven't seen the man since. I moved away at the end of June, and Mom never had any more break-ins or calls from blocked numbers. Whoever the man had been and whatever his intentions were, he seemed to have gone. I came down in September of 2010 to visit my mom for a week. I spent a lot of time napping on the couch while she was at work. On the evening before she took me back to the airport, my mom complained about me leaving smudges on the front windows. I got up to see what she was talking about, and my stomach leapt into my mouth. I told her they weren't smudges on the front windows that look right in on the couch that I had been napping on were a pair of large splayed handprints. Just because you're an engineer doesn't mean I'll get into your car. So this happened to me a few months ago in like February. I had a job a few months ago in the busiest mall in my country that was downtown. I live in the suburbs an hour away by transit, so I would commute via subway and then bus to get home. So one of the more annoying managers, who was very anal about things being clean, was working that night and made me stay for an hour extra that night cleaning. I'd usually be done by 10:30, but ended up leaving at 11:30 p.m. This was, I believe, on a weekend. Anyways, so I get to my stop after a very long hour commute home and get off the bus. I wait at the crosswalk for the light to signal I can cross the road, and a black BMW pulls up beside me. He rolls down his window and asked if I wanted a ride. I thought it was an Uber since they're taken over in my city and politely declined. I cross the road and begin trekking in the snow towards my home. I see him drive up the street I'm on and park across the road. He gets out and runs over to me. At this point, I'm a little freaked out. I continue walking nonetheless. He starts walking with me. He introduces himself. Hey, I'm his name, and I'm an engineer. I work for the city and make $38 an hour. You should get in my car and we can hang out. By now, I'm like, okay, I need to get home quick. No thanks, I need to get home. It's late, I'm sorry. I say to which he replies, aw, come on, just for a few minutes. We can hang out at the park and smoke. At this point, I'm spewing any excuse I can muster up to get him to leave me alone. Yeah, it's cold out and I have to wake up early tomorrow for work. He pushes. I do too, so it's only a few minutes. Just get in my car. I repeatedly declined all of his offers while I walked home, which he followed me up until my porch, where I told him I'd call the cops, to which he said, I'm sorry, I just thought you were cute and I wanted to get to know you. I laughed and got into my house and proceeded to call the cops. He got a warning that I found out about later on. Oh, and the best part of this is, he's my sister's friend's older brother. Anyways, that happened a while back, and I started reading the subreddit, and it made me remember that story.